Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, or if you're elsewhere, good morning, good evening. My name is Joan Marcus, and I serve as the Dean at the School of Business, Woodbury University. Welcome to the first event organized by the School of Business Alumni Advisory Council. Our topic for this evening is titled Thriving Through the Recession, and three of our distinguished Woodbury alums will share insights from their area of expertise with you in hopes that these insights may assist you in not only surviving, but doing well throughout the challenges of today. Please allow me to first introduce our speakers. Matthew Gilbert, MBA, is a teacher, researcher, and trainer with more than 30 years of experience writing, speaking, and consulting. Matthew spent 6 years educating undergraduates in Dubai before returning to the United States, so international experience galore. Currently a lecturer of marketing in the Wall College of Business at Coastal Carolina University, Mr. Gilbert teaches consumer behavior, international business, personal selling, principles of marketing, and social media marketing courses. As the director of the university's Each One Teach One Entrepreneurship Institute, he develops educational activities that inspire innovation mindsets in underrepresented adolescents. Mr. Gilbert also facilitates corporate training and implements instructional design initiatives for entrepreneurs, but also for Fortune 500 employees and government officials. He's a charismatic speaker, as you will learn soon, who has delivered 3 TEDx talks and coached speakers for a 4th event. He holds a bachelor's degree in English from the University of California at Santa Barbara and an MBA from Woodbury University. Additionally, he earned an Innovation and Entrepreneurship Certificate from the Stanford Center for Professional Development. And if you would like to learn more about Mr. Gilbert, please visit his website at matthewagilbert.com. Maria Palangian, MBA, is a serial entrepreneur with extensive expertise in smart city marketing and tech startups, bringing together a proprietary process that harnesses community-centered city takeover marketing campaigns utilizing advanced technology. He owns 2 companies, Globafly, a smart city marketing agency with Fortune 500 clients, including the New York Times, Mercedes-Benz, Infinity, Next Trucking, and a plethora of government entities. Her second company is RomaLeaf.com, an organic hemp CBD brand with a flagship store in Studio City. Its mission is to add relief to people's routines. RomaLeaf has been featured in national outlets, including GQ, Vogue, Vanity Fair, Good Day LA, Fox 11, and others. Maria currently hosts Startup to Success, a Los Angeles podcast, where she reveals her unfiltered journey of running her companies while gathering key insights and best practices for some of today's most influential people. With an MBA from Woodbury University, Maria is passionate about motivating individuals to achieve success in entrepreneurship. She lives in the Los Angeles area with her husband and with her 3 children. And if you would like to learn more about Maria, visit globalfly.com. Charbel Gabi, MBA, Woodbury MBA, and RICP, Retirement Income Certified Professional, was born in Lebanon and immigrated to Southern California in 1989. After graduating cum laude from the University of California, San Diego with a business degree, Charbel began working for Morgan Stanley. In 2004, he left the finance industry to join the family business and open a restaurant in Glendora. 12 years later, he had 2 concepts and 7 locations. While running these businesses, Charbel earned his MBA from Woodbury University. He gradually began to realize, however, that his passion for financial planning was still very much alive, and his desire for running restaurants was quickly fading. The pandemic illuminated the importance of financial planning in his life, And Charbel found a nice home and a nice area for his pension with Westpac Wealth Partners. That company provided the access to the business planning that he longed for. He joined the firm in 2020 and has since applied the strategies he learned to his many years of business ownership. Today, Mr. Gabi provides tremendous value to his business clients, showing them the business planning process through the eyes of a fellow business owner. Charbel loves spending time with his wife and with his two sons and his daughter. Ladies and gentlemen, we are asking your full attention to our wonderful speakers, and I would like to start inviting Matthew Gilbert.
Thanks so much, Dr. Marquez, and thank you all for having me here, and thank you for those attending. It's my pleasure to share what I've learned with you in the hopes that it can help some of you along the way and give you some insight, ideas, inspire you. I've always benefited from the kindness of strangers, as they say, but more so very specifically from a lot of mentorship. And I always harken back to my experience at Woodbury as a really pivotal point in my professional and personal development. And I'm so very grateful for that experience and really appreciative of the opportunity to give back. So without further ado, I will present to you what I have prepared. So my approach about dealing with a recession or handling hard times is one about basically leveraging a lifeboat, leveraging your lifeboat to advance through adversity. And my perspective on this is one of basically planning ahead. Don't look for a lifeboat. Don't look for your uh, your your life preserver at the very moment you need it. You need to take efforts and make great inroads beforehand so that everything is ready to go before you need it, so that you're not in a panic and you've already developed those relationships and those networks, and you've already prepared yourself for what may come. So I wanted to start with a quote by Sun Tzu, which is a gentleman with whom I became first acquainted through one of my courses with Dr. Damon. So I thought I'd give a little shout out to him. So the quote that I have here is: plan for what is difficult while it is easy, do what is great while it is small. And so it's pretty self-explanatory, right? You want to get ahead of the curve. You want to take care of those things that will be harder to do later when you're in a pinch, when you're in a panic. Do those things, or at least start to do those things before you're in a situation where you have to do them. Take care of these things while you still have the option to do them. So let me go ahead and move through each one. So basically, I've divided this up into 3 steps. And the way that I typically like to approach anything and I like to present information actually mirrors Simon Sinek's Golden Circle philosophy of the why, how, what concept. So often when I give a presentation of any kind, I always try to kind of structure around that concept and that process. So my first step here is to build a lifeboat. So first you want to get going and start creating what you're going to need, collecting the tools, uh, collecting the resources, preparing all those things that will help you later on down the road so that you can start doing it thoughtfully and preparedly without any panic or stress or frustration. So the first part, when you build your lifeboat, it's really about defining your why. And I always interpret this why stage as your purpose. What is your purpose? Figuring out who you are and what you're all about. So I always tie this back to concepts of personal mastery. For me, years ago, I took a course and we focused a lot on personal mastery. And it was really from that course that helped me to clarify a lot of things about myself. It was even through that course that I came up with like my personal motto. I made the first iteration of my bio. I really started to get some clarity on really who I was by learning to define it and put into words those ideas and those concepts about myself that I kind of intrinsically knew, but didn't always know how to explain to other people. And in the days before Google Maps, I often explain this to my students when I teach them personal branding, which is what I always anchor towards personal mastery. Whenever I teach personal branding, I anchor it to these ideals of personal mastery. So I tell them, in the days before Google Maps, when I was your age, you would kind of know how to get to your house. You would know where to go left, where to go right, but you might not know the street names. You just kind of have a muscle memory feel of where to go. But when somebody asks you, well, what street do I turn left at? What street do I turn right at? And in some cases you might know, but the reality is you just know where to go because you know where to go. And you wouldn't have always known how to tell people where to go in a way that would have been clear for them if they had not already been familiar with the route. So I kind of align the idea of personal mastery with that concept of figuring out how to define words that you can use to explain who you are first to yourself and then to other people. And then beyond just the words, it becomes a foundation through which you can really start to craft your statement of self. Who are you? How will you present yourself to other people? What is it about you that makes you different? What is it about you that makes you unique? What is it that drives you intrinsically? What are you motivated by? What are your goals, your ambitions? So usually when I guide students through a personal branding workshop, I always start with really, really fundamental things like what are your values? What are your beliefs? I start that far back. To me, that's the most important thing to do. And the thing you want to do first, because that really informs everything else. So once you've put into words or sort of like, taken these concepts that are somewhere in your head and taking them out of your head and put them on a piece of paper somewhere, they start to become tangible. They start to become tactile. And you can then start to better understand them and figure out a way to communicate those things either specifically or generally, depending on what purpose you need to use it for. So, again, start with your values, start with your beliefs. On a more practical level, think about what are skills you have, what are specific skills, things you're good at, what are your strengths, what can you offer an individual? What can you offer an organization? Who are you? What can you do for others? And fundamentally, what are you all about and how do you make a difference? A few resources that I have found to be helpful in going through this process. The first is a website. It's called the Authentic Happiness website. It's through the University of Pennsylvania, and this is Martin Seligman. And when I was actually in Dubai, one of the courses I taught was a happiness course, happiness studies. And really it was positive psychology, but they like the word happiness, so it fits. So, but I found this resource, and he's really sort of the godfather, so to speak, of a lot of the positive psychology movement. And the website is free to use. It's full of tons of resources, all kind of like self-assessment tools, different ways for you to kind of take little quizzes or do little assessments and start finding out things about yourself, but in a way that is reproducible or shareable with other people. I'm going to skip to the third one for a second. Part of what is included in that Authentic Happiness website is the thing that is also separately listed at the bottom, which is the VIA Character Strengths Survey. Now, if you were to go to that survey directly, I believe you have to pay for it. If you go through the Authentic Happiness website, which is free, it's free. And so it gives you like a sort of a short summary of your top, your strengths. And again, I like to try to work from my strengths rather than weaknesses, even though that's a very common question you get in a job interview. You want to really figure out what can you offer, what is positive about yourself, so that you can start communicating that to people and also know what skills you have, know what strengths you have. So again, you can offer those to people. I'm a big proponent of giving without the expectation of receiving. So once you know what you're really good at, and we all kind of know, but once you can kind of formally have some verbiage that explains it, then that helps you to sort of figure out how to explain it, how to identify opportunities to share it. The middle one is really super helpful. Honestly, this is one of the most helpful things I've ever done for myself in terms of really trying to clarify for me who I am, what skills I have, what are my strengths, really where, kind of what should I do with my life. It was through taking this Clifton Strengths Assessment, which at the time, and I believe still is, connected to a book called Now Discover Your Strengths. It's part of Gallup now. And again, you go to this website, and there's a modest charge. I believe in the past, I don't know currently, but if you were to buy the book, you would get a code to take this assessment. It's sort of similar to like a Myers-Briggs kind of a thing, where you're basically answering these different questions, and sometimes they're repeated. There's a slightly different approach to the same thing. And at the end of it, it will identify your top 34 strengths. But I believe the sort of basic entry level, what you get for free, so to speak, I think are your top five. And quite honestly, I mean, unless you're really, really curious, that's enough to take action on, right? For me, my top five strengths, I think two of them were very clearly aligned with teaching. And when I took this assessment, it was very shortly after I completed my MBA. And when I was kind of already taking my first steps towards a career shift into academia, and the strengths that I had were very clearly aligned with the idea or with the profession of teaching and education. So it was kind of a great reminder and a great help to me to realize, oh, okay, it was always kind of obvious, but sometimes having somebody or something else point out the obvious to you is a really great way to help you kind of refocus yourself and move in the right direction. So those are just a few websites. There's certainly many more, but those are a few that I've had personal experience with, and that's a really great way to start getting some experience and insight into yourself. I also do have some worksheets that I've used with my students. If anybody is interested in those, I'm certainly willing to share those with you offline. So certainly you can contact me directly or through Woodbury. Always my pleasure to help and to share. All right. So the next step is to buoy your lifeboat, or if you're a fan of 70s and 80s rock, Bowie your lifeboat. This is about deciding your how. What is your process? How are you going to go about preparing yourself for those anticipated moments of challenge and uncertainty? So for me, this is all about initiating professional development and getting ahead of the curve again. So don't wait until you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, like my skill set is out of date, or like I've heard of Chat GPT or AI or whatever it is that interests you or is relevant to your career, but I don't know what to do with it, or I don't know how to do any of it. And you don't have to be, an expert at everything. I'll tell you, one of the greatest lessons I learned through my MBA program is that you don't need to know how to do everything. And in fact, it's better that, as the saying goes, you are not the smartest person in the room, at least about everything. But you really have to have an understanding, at least generally, about all the various aspects of whatever your industry does and whatever the different parts and players in it do. So even if it's just a functional understanding so you can speak to something with knowledge, that's great. But there are a lot of really good resources for you for personal and professional development. Mainly here, I'm talking about skill growth, um, hard and soft skills. Some are free, some have a cost to them, but they all have some amount of value. That's going to depend based on what it is you're looking for, where it is you're looking to go, how it is you might need to pivot. We'll talk about pivoting in a little bit. So the first thing I would recommend is look for ways that you can establish yourself as a thought leader. And quite honestly, it's doing things like this, right? It's putting yourself out there. It's sharing the knowledge that you have. You all probably know more about certain things than you realize that you do. Whenever I talk to my students, and I do this a lot in my personal selling class, I try to frame the class within the context of selling yourself, because they're all looking ahead to graduating at some point, some sooner than others. But doing something, what are they going to do next? And a lot of them, they'll feel like, well, I haven't really worked, or I've only worked as a server at a restaurant, or I haven't worked in management, I haven't worked in XYZ. But they always, students almost always, and honestly, everybody always undersells the skills and the ability, and at the very least, the potential you have. So I always tell my students, and I want to encourage each of you to do the same, is look for the less obvious things that are evidence of your aptitude and evidence of your ability. So from a student perspective, I always tell students, what organizations were you involved in? Were you in a leadership role? Were you on a sports team? Were you in like a Greek organization? Were you in like a MBA association? Some kind of entity, organization? What did you get involved with while you were a student? While you were a student, what kind of work did you do? If you had an internship, you got a lot of experience. It doesn't need to be paid all the time either. You just have to find ways to say, look, you know what? I realize I've done this kind of thing a lot. I have a lot of experience with it, and I could share my knowledge about this with other people. And again, I always try to come at it like, how can I basically give something of myself to somebody else to help them better themselves without really thinking about what am I going to get by doing so. And there are some simpler and more complicated ways to do this, but sometimes it's just about reaching out to contexts you already have, offering to give workshops or presentations, just jumping out there, getting involved. For me, when I knew I wanted to get into higher ed, I was approaching it from a couple different angles, and I came into higher ed from a very like non-traditional pathway. One of the things I did to professionally prepare myself for the classroom management part of it and the kind of curriculum prep part of it was I taught traffic school. So how many of you ever gotten a speeding ticket or any kind of moving violation, right? If you've ever had to spend a Saturday like being bored to death learning about, traffic laws and whatnot, I was the guy teaching those classes for a period of time. But I did it and I was thrilled to do it because I thought this is an opportunity for me to learn how to take what I know and be able to share that knowledge with other people. So just giving yourself opportunities to practice and sort of what I used to jokingly call like teaching traffic school was like pitching in the minor leagues. Like nobody's really paying attention, but if you happen to do really well, it helps build your confidence. It gives you a skill set. It gives you experience that you can speak from, and then you start to build your repertoire, right? Another great resource, just real quick, of a website I didn't put here, but it's a website called Quoted, KWOTED.com. It's kind of like LinkedIn for being like a subject matter expert for journalists. So you go on there, you create a profile, basically you list all the things you've done, your experience, and basically you sign up for like kind of a daily email update. And it's all kind of reporters, television reporters, people writing blogs, like newspaper reporters, journalists, all writing different kinds of articles or doing different kind of videos, whatever it is, about different kinds of topics all across the board. And if you put yourself there and you start pitching yourself basically for various articles, for various media opportunities, you'd be surprised that sometimes it takes a little persistence and you got to kind of figure out what's your niche and what's your angle. But I found some really good success with this, and sometimes it builds, right? You start connecting with different reporters, with different media outlets. They start coming back to you directly. Um, there's a freemium version of this account. It's good enough, I think, to get started. And I found some really good success. I got some good traction off of that. Again, volunteering for things like any clubs you've been in. I gave a workshop once to like a regional like a meeting for undergrads in my college fraternity once years ago, right? So think about the organizations that you've been involved with. Think about sort of, as they say, I hate this phrase, but the low-hanging fruit. Like where can you go to sort of share the knowledge you have in a way that's a little bit low profile so you don't have to worry about stumbling or bumbling, but you can still get the experience doing it. You meet people. You just never know where opportunities lead. And again, this connects to the next one, which is networking and LinkedIn. And I kind of split these, but they're on the same line because I mean like physically networking, like going to industry events, going to mixers, participating in different activities. Like where I am here, I'm in the Myrtle Beach area in South Carolina. We have this great little startup hub. It's called the Aspire Hub, and it's connected to an entity that is all about kind of the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in what's called the Grand Strand area. And so I'm trying to get involved with them, get the organization, my Each One Teacher organization connected into that, being present, participating, meeting people. I think physical networking, especially post COVID, is still so vital. Just getting to know people. And again, in person as in online, just get to know them first, right? Develop a rapport, develop a relationship. I don't know about you, but anytime someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn, usually this is where it happens. And like they'll reach out to connect, and I connect. And before I like unpress the button to accept, they're already pitching me something in my inbox, right? I don't know about you, but I instantly block those people. Like, I don't want to deal with a pitch before I even get to know you. So this goes back to my bigger point of kind of priming the pump. Don't just connect with someone to immediately try to like work them over for some connection or ask them if they have a job or ask them if they have something. As best you can, develop a rapport. This is why you want to get ahead of the curve, develop a relationship, develop a network. There are going to be people you naturally know more than others. Um, I realized not that long ago that my LinkedIn account is actually the longest continuously used social network account I've had. There's a place you can go on your LinkedIn profile to see when you started the account. I opened my LinkedIn account on September 29th, 2004. I have about 7,000 connections. I don't know how, but I do. Now, do I know all those 7,000? Probably not. At the same time, it's an opportunity. So look for those kind of options. Professional development, like Google has a great career certificate. Woodbury just launched a series of professional certificates. If you haven't yet considered an MBA, I can't tout the Woodbury one enough. Like I said, it was immensely important in my life, and it gave me insight, information. It connected me to people that have helped me to find myself and to get to where I wanted to be. Lastly, when you find yourself in that position, when all your preparation is finally kind of done and something happens, you're in the current situation that we find ourselves, either along with many others, or you just personally are in a situation where you suddenly find yourself downsized or whatnot. Now that you've done the groundwork, now is the time to actually put it into practice. So you're going to get on the lifeboat, you're going to board it. So this is about discovering your what. What I always interpret as the proof. What is like the evidence of what you did worked, or the evidence that you have a skill set, that you have been successful in your efforts. So this is about creating and engaging opportunities. So kind of a building from the previous two steps, right? What can you do that is not exploitive of other people, but is a mutual benefit, but puts you out there, gets you in front of people, helps people to learn about you and your skills. But again, always try to come at it from the angle of what can I do for you, not here's what I need for you to do for me, right? Because I don't know about you, but that's a huge immediate like turn off for me. Like the minute someone just comes at me, especially if I don't really know them and they're trying to leverage me for something, it's very exploitive, right? Um, so create those opportunities, but be genuine about it. Look for ways that are mutually beneficial. Um, you want to find ways to both pivot over, under, and around obstacles. I highlighted this. This was actually the theme and the topic of my first TEDx talk, about finding a different way to solve a problem. It's really easy, and believe me, I can get really kind of sucked down under sometimes when I hit a wall sometimes. And that's a natural initial response, but inevitably the creative side of me eventually comes around and realizes, you know what, I kind of like, maybe like is a strong word, but I appreciate the fact that the initial idea didn't work, because now it's forcing me to think of a better way or a different way to do it and to try again. So recognize, what doesn't work and move on from it. You want to push outside of your comfort zone. Do things that you didn't think that you ever would. When I went to Dubai, I had done some international travel, but I had never lived abroad. I had never been to Dubai. The closest I had ever been to Dubai was watching some show on the Travel Channel about the Burj Al Arab. That's about as close as it got. And I think I had ridden a camel once somewhere. Um, do those things that kind of scare you a little bit. I mean, I don't mean like, base jumping off of something, but push yourself a little bit. Sometimes you'll be surprised what you can do once you sometimes are in a position where you have to be a little bit brave, but take a little bit of a leap of faith. I mean, make sure there's maybe some kind of a net. Don't totally expose yourself, but look into alternate things. For me, teaching and living abroad was something I had never thought about till I was in a situation where it wasn't the only option, but it suddenly emerged as this just sort of big, hairy, audacious goal, kind of like wild, crazy idea that actually wound up being like the best decision I ever made. Tying this all together is this concept of the Stockdale paradox, which again is something I learned about in Dr. DeMond's class when we read Good to Great. And so Admiral Stockdale was somebody who was in the Hanoi Hilton in the Vietnam War. He was one of the gentlemen who made it a very, very long time. And what he said was basically the people who survived were those that were realistic, but not like pessimistic. So this sort of the shortened version of this philosophy is to retain faith that you will prevail while confronting the most brutal facts of your current reality. So it's not about being Pollyanna, but it's not about being nihilistic either. Like you want to be realistic. Like, okay, I'm in this horrible situation. I don't know when it's going to end. He said the worst thing you can do is overpromise to yourself and to other people, making up an arbitrary projection as far as when it will be fixed, because you don't know that. You can't control those things. Don't make plans based on elements of your situation you can't control. Do your best to sort of just acknowledge that you're in a tough spot. Do whatever you can to make it through while still looking for ways to pivot around, under, and over it. So, kind of in summary, all of this is about basically taking a personal inventory, building that personal inventory, doing the most you can to sort of improve what you already have, to acquire new skills, to create a network, to expand a network, and doing all of these things before you need to, so that when you don't find yourself in a situation by which you have to do it and you're panicking and you're doing things in a way that is very one-sided and really kind of selfish, because especially if there are a lot of other people in that position, as there kind of is in this moment and there have been at other points in the past. So I hope you find this helpful, and again, my pleasure to share. And if I can be of any further assistance to anybody, certainly just go ahead and contact me. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. That was awesome. And what I'm going to share, honestly, you can't do what I'm going to share with you without doing the part that Matthew went over. You have to know your why. You have to know the what. Very, very informative. Thank you, Matthew. I actually took notes. I would like to start off with a quote. When times are good, you should advertise. When times are bad, you must advertise. This quote by advertising pioneer Bruce Barton was written about 100 years ago. And there's overwhelming evidence that suggests that this is precisely what small business owners, brands should be doing. I mean, I'm not going to go into history, but if we do look back to history a little bit, in 1970s, Toyota really took a turn with Volkswagen. In 1990s, that's when McDonald's took a large market share. 2008, Amazon was, having increased sales of 28% in 2008. So I do want to emphasize on that. And I would like to say that internally in our agency, we do have this thing. We say share of voice now equals share of market later. So going into leveraging branding and marketing, I just want to really just high level share the 5 reasons why branding and marketing in times of recession is important. So number 1 is brand awareness. Obviously, staying top of mind in your potential customers or current customers' mind is important. It can just give them a little bit more awareness about your existence and that you're still in business, right? Differentiating from competitors, that's very important, because as consumers are cutting back on spending, they're more likely going to be very selective about the brands they choose. So leveraging branding and marketing can really differentiate you. Another one is increasing customer loyalty. This is super important in difficult times. You really want to start nurturing your customers, especially, implementing the 80 and 20 rule. 20% of your customers are probably generating the 80% of your revenue. And so really having that loyalty with them and treating them like VIPs is important. And for those of you who don't have small businesses, I will touch upon that too. So I just wanted to make sure that I cover both how to market and brand yourself as a professional as well as a small business. And then going back to number 4, which is opportunity for growth. While recession can be challenging, it also presents opportunities. Like, for example, Amazon really started growing in 2008 and beyond, right? I mean, they really were innovative. They figured out a way to cut the middleman and pass on the savings to the consumer. So it's a great time to really grow, whether you're a professional or a small business owner. The opportunities are going to be endless. You're going to be, if you're looking at it with a positive mindset, I'm sure you can come across a lot of opportunities. And then building trust and credibility, that's super important. You want to really invest on that. And by marketing and branding yourself, especially as a thought leader, which will cover next on the next slide is instrumental. Going into thought leadership. Why is thought leadership important today, especially? As you all know, the pandemic created a lot of noise online, especially, right? And for whether you're a professional or a small business owner, it's noisy out there. It's really difficult to compete. You know, the ones that have the biggest advertising budgets tend to get all the attention. And lately there's been this shift, and going back to what Matthew emphasized on personal branding, it's very instrumental today to have, whether you're a professional or a small business owner, to have a story, to have your why, to really have a clear why as to why you're doing what you're doing. And for many brands nowadays, a lot of times their story is, it started with a personal need to solve a problem, or they're experts in a field and they're sharing their expertise, and that leads them to building the brand, right? The company indirectly ends up building through that. I'll give you an example. I started really emphasizing on smart city takeovers when I was working at New York Times, and I realized that I'm obsessed with technology and I'm obsessed with community. And I combined the two, and I started really studying everything, the technology and so on. And now I get invited to speak about the topic and or do news interviews and so on. And indirectly, I'm promoting my marketing agency, Globify. And so going back to building brand authority as a thought leader, that's precisely what you can do. You can start building your brand and become an authority, creating trust and credibility, obviously. Matthew mentioned the website, but there's also another good one called Haro, which is also free to use, and you can start getting opportunities to be interviewed on different either publications, news media, and so on. And that's one way to start building the trust and credibility, whether you're a professional or a small business owner. And then standing out from the competitors, it's really going to give you that leadership, right? Like this thought leadership perspective on insights. And if you're studying whatever it is that you're interested in, that you'd like to become an expert in, you're always going to know a little bit more than the competitors if you really emphasize and focus on your expertise. And then driving engagement and conversion. It's like I said, for me, going out there and presenting my expertise on smart city takeovers has driven the engagement and the conversation with my potential clients, and then led to me gaining more clients. And finally, expanding your audience. You just never know who you're going to come across. And as a thought leader, a lot of times you might just be helping and giving advice, and it could be just free and you're not making money, but you never know where it can lead you to. So I highly recommend, whether you're a student or a professional or a small business owner, start thinking of whatever field you're in and start positioning yourself as a thought leader. On the next slide, and I'm not going to dive too deep into this, I want to make sure Charbel has time to present his slides as well. But this is a roadmap, a very simple roadmap as to how you can become a thought leader. Obviously, you have to start with the work as to why you're doing this. What is your mission? What's your vision? And you want to have a personal sort of mission and vision, as well as a professional one, and then make sure it's all tied together. And then as you solidify that and you solidify, you know, this is just an example of a tech startup owner who's positioning himself as a informational technology strategist. And so when you solidify what your mission and vision is, what is your expertise, then you start building the rest of the pillars, like content creation strategy. What can you start doing on LinkedIn? What type of blog posts can you start creating? What type of videos can you start creating? And then a lot of people nowadays, since podcast is so easy, you can really start a podcast show from your home office, wherever you have a connection to Zoom. and record and start a podcast show and start talking about your expertise, your field. Bring on other guests to interview and gain more, knowledge and insights. And then when you think of PR and marketing, speaking engagements, obviously social media, a lot of sites like Haro, and I believe it was Know It that Matthew mentioned. Matthew, what was that site again? I'm sorry. I want to make sure that Haro and that website you mentioned is shared with the guests. Maybe you can put it in the chat so they can share it, because that's a free, amazing opportunity for almost anybody to get out there and start getting free media attention, which is instrumental when you're building a brand. And I'll pass it on to Charbel. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Matthew. So I think that was the one you were doing, Francesca. If you could just make the slide bigger. That's okay. If not, no problem. There you go. Hello, everybody. So I want to talk a little bit about recession basics, right? What is a recession? When are we in a recession? I bet you if we ask, the people that are on this call, many of you will feel like you're already in a recession. Yet sometimes it takes the National Bureau of Economic Review a year to actually tell us that we are in a recession. And what a recession solely is just a part of the business cycle, right? We have the recession, then we have the trough, then we have the growth, and then we have the peak. So those are, unfortunately, it is part of the cycle. And sometimes, you read the news and they say, well, it's not officially a recession. You're like, dude, yes, it is. I'm feeling it. So it's very important to understand kind of what's happening and how it affects your life. But just to give you some quick basics, it starts off with kind of the low supply, which COVID caused, high prices that leads to inflation, which lead to interest rate hikes, and then that slows down the economy because the Fed is trying to slow down the economy to be able to get a hold of inflation. But as a result, it creates layoffs, it creates decreased demand. So, and unfortunately, this is part of the cycle. Right now, we're in the inflation part of it. And if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, again, so what is inflation? I mean, I'm sure many of you go to either Costco or Trader Joe's. If you fill the cart this year with the exact same items you filled last year, it's definitely much higher than the 6-7% that they're telling you it is, right? So we feel it. We've never felt it like we felt it this year, and that's because of also the speed at the rate that the prices were rising and the rate that the Fed is. That's why they're raising interest rates so fast in order to be able to keep that under control. And then so again, if you're looking at the slide, how does it affect us, right? Well, depending on who you are, what life stage you're in, or your industry, it affects us completely different, right? If you're a business owner, the employee that you were paying $25, well, now to keep him, you need to pay him $35. Well, as a result, now you cannot keep your 20 employees, you got to have 15, because you're just not suddenly selling, 30% more. So all of these things take into account. That's why the increased costs of goods with regards to supply chain issues and increased costs. And then you have issues maintaining your profit margin. But just to take a step back, inflation is the loss of your dollar, right? So it's basically too many dollars chasing too fewer goods. And so as individuals, for example, income, sometimes you get raises from companies at 2, 3, 4, 5%. Well, when inflation is 7, that's officially, but you're feeling it at 10 to 15, income is not keeping up with it. And that's one of the reasons we're also feeling it. Plus, if you're retired on a fixed income, I mean, unless that fixed income is going up with the rate of inflation, it's going to affect you dramatically. You're going to end up spending less, and hence the slower economic growth. And you see it down there, you get a little fear, a little anxiety, everybody kind of trying not to overspend, because the uncertainty is what creates that fear and anxiety. And obviously we felt it in COVID where things change, you know, some businesses were closed for months and months at a time. And I don't think any of us could go back and actually would have guessed that that could ever happen. If you were to tell me my restaurant was going to close for, you know, few months, and it started as a week, a few months, and then only outdoor, and then it take 2 years, I would tell you you're crazy. So again, so now those are just kind of the basics of the problem. I'd love to, on the next slide, discuss kind of some of the things that we could do to minimize the effects on our lives. So I'm not sure if we can make this bigger, but this is the theme today is leveraging your lifeboat. And so it's going to be just a quick discussion about leveraging your finances, right? So this is a standard balance sheet is your assets, which is what you own, and then minus your liabilities, which is what you owe, and that gives you your net worth. So we'd like to add kind of a couple extra sections here. The protection is as you're building your wealth, you want to protect that wealth today, and legally, financially, all of the different aspects. And on the bottom is we feel that it's the biggest effect on, or the kind of the center of your financial world, right? Cash flow. Why? Well, let's talk about it. If you spend less than what you make, your cash flow is positive. You can grow your assets, or you could pay down liabilities. Well, vice versa the other way, right? If your assets, if your cash flow is negative, you're spending more than what you're making, then you're going to have to either liquidate some of your assets, or you're going to have to take on more debt. And so how do we solve that issue? And one of the key things is saving 15 to 20% of your gross income. That is, you know, obviously it depends on your age, but even the 30-year-olds that we talk to that are, you know, let's say even if you're making 50,000 or if you're making $1 million, the problem is if you the goal is if you start saving at 15% when you're making 50,000, and as your income grows, that gets built into your structure and the way that you do it. I even do it with my kids, right? They get some money from grandma. Well, that money is not going all to you. So we have to separate it into the savings and then, you know, taxes, and then you can spend the rest, so that this way they understand that you need to pay some people before you're able to pay. Well, you got to pay yourself too in the savings part. So what amount should you save number wise, right? So the minimum is 6 to 12 months of expenses liquid. That's the minimum we recommend. And something that liquid means that it's easily convertible to cash. So ideally, that number needs to be 12 to 24 months of income liquid. Now, we used to talk to people before COVID. They're like, what? Are you crazy? Like, I'm not going to be out of work for 12 to 24 months. And so obviously that was a reality check. So we never have pushback on that. But it's not really just for the downtime. It's really also to take opportunities of the downtime, because you know, if real estate prices go down and you're looking to pick up investment real estate, it's great to have liquid cash to be able to take advantage of the opportunities. What if you have a business and you're trying to acquire another company? Well, having the cash on hand will give you the power to grow your net worth. And why do we always talk about net worth? It's very simple, because you work your whole life to increase that net worth. And the reason is that once you retire, that net worth needs to provide you enough income to live like you were living when, you know, with the income that you were living with. So it's extremely important to realize that your net worth is what turns into cash flow. Your assets is what turns into cash flow. Your businesses, your real estate, all of that. And anything that's going to suck your cash flow is on the red section. I did want to just leave one last thought. Oh, actually, you know what? Let's move on to the last one. And so the other way that you can strengthen that boat is to build a team. So I wrote here notes because I know that Matt said something that I tell our clients all the time. Like, you don't need to learn everything. First of all, I don't know why people think that they need to work. I don't know. I guess this is me. Like, they're professionals that are experts in what they do. Why do you need to go learn what a CPA does to do your own taxes when you could free up hours and hours of your time to do other things, or to expand your business, to work on the things that Matt and Maria talked about? And then the other thing is the idea is not to be in the right, Matt. You said not the smartest. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room. And I think there's a story. I want to end with a story about Henry Ford that's always kind of triggered me. And I think the story goes something like this, where he was challenged by reporters because he had an issue with World War One, and he was challenged by reporters. And they said, you don't do anything. You just have people working for you. And he said, well, you know what? Because I'd like to invite the media, and I'm going to show you that I can answer any question I can about any part of my business. He invited engineers and I believe he invited, reporters and whoever it is, and they started asking extremely technical questions. And all he did is every time they'd ask a question, if it had to do with assembly, he would click the button, pick up the phone, talk to his head of assembly, and answer their question. So the idea is to build your team, build your strength so that you can, and look, a lot of us do ask family, do ask friends, but their situation, their balance sheet, their goals are completely different. Even though that advice might be meant to like be helpful, it might not be the best advice in your particular situation. Just because your next door neighbor made $1 million on Bitcoin, it doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody. So just wanted to end it there, and we'd love to, any questions? We'd love to answer any questions anybody has. Thank you for the time.